Good to see you. Thanks for joining me today. My name is Jarrell. Have you guys ever had pumpernickel? Pumpernickel bread? Ever had that? I've never had it. Thought I'd pick it up. Now, you often hear about people that say that it's not very good. Either they've never heard of it before and they heard from somebody that pumpernickel's not very good. Oh, it's bad. I don't like it. I don't like it. It's bad. But it's not really helpful to say something is bad, say you don't like it. You might describe the texture to somebody so they can understand a bit more why you don't like pumpernickel bread. Rogebröd. I'd heard a bakery in Germany talking very proudly about their pumpernickel bread, and they were so convincing, and this man was so passionate about his pumpernickel bread, explaining how he made it, why his pumpernickel bread is better than standard bread. I mean, no yeast? Sure, yeah, get me in on that. I don't have a problem with yeast, but he made it sound like yeast was some terrible thing, and he said, oh, my bread is good. So yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and give that a try, and I think I'll make up my own mind about whether or not pumpernickel bread is something that I would like. Now, just because somebody says something is bad, it doesn't mean that thing is actually bad. It means that that person does not like it. It's important that we figure out a way to parse the information that we see day to day and make up our own minds. If we hear that people say something is bad, it might give us an inkling as to whether or not we would like that thing for ourselves, but it's important that we look at things for ourselves. We use our own skills of perception to determine whether or not we actually like something and whether or not we should give that thing a try. Now, everybody says that crack cocaine and heroin is bad for you. Everyone says, oh, it's so bad. Does that mean that you should go and try crack cocaine and heroin for yourself? I personally would not recommend it. You can see for yourself the effect that crack cocaine and heroin has on other people. I do not have any crack cocaine or heroin here with me today. I don't have that as a gag prop normally. You don't have to try crack cocaine or heroin to know that it's bad, in the same way that you don't need to necessarily try a game for yourself to know that it's bad, but it is important to at least look at it and determine for yourself whether you would like it or not. So let's go ahead and take a look at Star Wars Outlaws for the Switch 2. I've seen a lot of people online that saw the game running in handheld mode at Games Expos, and they said that it's bad, it's bad, it's bad, it's bad. And we recently have seen leaked copies of Star Wars Outlaws running on Switch 2, and at least in docked mode, the game appears to be running acceptably. The frame rate looks playable. It may not be the greatest thing in the world, in the same way that maybe pumpernickel is not the greatest thing in the world. Doesn't need to be the greatest thing in the world in order for you to be able to enjoy it. It's okay if you dislike pumpernickel bread. It's okay if you think it's disgusting and it's the worst thing in the world, and it's also okay if you enjoy pumpernickel bread. Don't let all the pumpernickel haters, the anti-pumpernickels, tell you that you're not allowed to enjoy pumpernickel bread. So we're going to take a look at two videos here. They come from two different users. One is Emerald Bearer and one is Mataleo. The first one compares the Switch 2 with the PS5 version side by side. Let's go ahead and boot that up and take a look. If you are here to hate games, to make fun of stuff, I mean this as respectfully as possible. Please don't subscribe for that. If you are looking for someone to insult and make fun of games because you hate them, I am genuinely, as respectfully as I can, asking you, please do not subscribe to this channel for that. I will not be here to insult or attack or make fun of games, people, or developers, so please don't subscribe for that. I will put the links in the description to these videos so you can check them out for yourself, and I recommend you take a look if this is something you are interested in. Now, just to make things clear, I don't particularly have any interest in this game. This is not something that I was going to play, but the topic itself is interesting to me in terms of comparing the versions running on Switch 2 and PS5. I don't particularly agree with Ubisoft's business practices, but I have seen that after the fact, when it comes to updating this game, improving it so that people can enjoy it better, I have seen the passion from the developers that go into that. Now, when the game launched, it was rough when it comes to the core design decisions, and I didn't necessarily see a game that I was interested in. And again, it's totally fine if you enjoyed it even at launch day. What I see here is a huge improvement over the launch version, but I see something very interesting when it comes to the Switch 2 version. Now, the PS5 relies heavily on brute forcing interesting visuals by relying on a complex lighting system. What I saw are developers who did not have a deeper understanding of visual communication and visual art. The developers of this game relied entirely on extremely computational, expensive processing in order to make the game look interesting. This is opposite from games that I've been looking at and discussing recently, where developers were using simpler techniques but had a stronger understanding of visual communication and art to create something that was just gorgeous, despite the fact that it is not visually complex when it comes to technology. Now, the PS5 version, you'll see, has two things over the Switch 2 version. It has fidelity and complexity, but to be very clear here, fidelity and complexity do not equal quality. It doesn't matter how much fidelity you have, it doesn't matter how much quantity you have, it doesn't matter. You will not have an interesting scene, you will not have quality. You might be able to impress people who don't really care that much, who are not looking for art. People just want to enjoy a gaming experience. Not everyone here, is looking for a Picasso, but for me as a gamer, I care whether or not the game that I'm experiencing was made by people that understand what they're doing. With game engines like Unreal Engine 5, you do not need competence. Anyone can produce a scene that looks visually rich and complex and dense, not necessarily good, but it can have fidelity and complexity because the game engine does all of the work for you. So I'm not bashing on this game, and I'm also not defending it. But what I see is a huge difference between the Switch 2 and the PS5 version. On the Switch 2, I can see they are not relying on the same complex lighting system that the PS5 has. The Switch 2 seems to be relying on physically based shaders, physically based rendering, which is something we've had for a very long time. Doesn't necessarily have the same kinds of reflections and volumetric lighting that the PS5 has. Volumetric lighting is a rendering technique that we use here in the games industry that allows us to visually convey a sense of density in the atmosphere, whether it be conveying fog, mist, dust, dirt, air particles in the air that bounce the light around and make things look interesting. Now, I assume there's a time of day system here, but even in the indoor settings, I'm seeing a stronger understanding when it comes to using light sources in an interesting way, because the Switch 2 version doesn't rely on brute forcing it with, extremely powerful fidelity when it comes to lighting and processing. So the lighting, they've had to make more conscious decisions on the Switch 2 version, and it's just visually, it's way more interesting. It's quite dull here on the inside of the building here. Everything is just more flat. The tonality is flat and dull. It's a bit more interesting on the PS2 version. I'm not sure what sort of decisions they've made, but an area, and I think it has to do with the time of day as well. Obviously during sunset, the lighting is more contrasty and more interesting, but I've seen the game running on PS5 through other scenes. I have seen it quite a bit before, and even throughout, I've never seen a scene in Star Wars Outlaws that looked interesting to me as an artist. Everything looks flat. There does not seem to be an understanding from the developers in terms of using tonality and color dynamic to create rich and interesting scenes. There does not seem to be any understanding when it comes to composition, framing, and cinematography. There doesn't seem to be an understanding of cinematography when it comes from this development team, especially when we look at cinematics that are framed in very workmanlike ways. So I would have liked to see this game be even better. I don't want these games to do poorly. So I don't want to see these games do poorly. I want to see developers do their best, produce something interesting and great for people. But the lighting choices here, there's a bit more contrast. There's a difference between tonality. It's just more interesting to see the developers make conscious decisions on the Switch 2 version, whereas on the PS5, they let advanced lighting systems do all of the work, and if you do that, you're just going to end up with something bland, where no artistry has gone into it. This is pretty neat. I don't know, whatever I'm looking at. The foliage is simpler when it comes to the complexity of the shaders. They blend into the environment better on the PS5. On the Switch 2, they stick out a bit more, and I don't particularly care if it means that the game can run better. The frame rate seemed decent in docked mode. I guess we'll see what it's like. Now, we have procedurally generated clouds in the sky. We have them here as well, but on the Switch 2 version, the procedurally generated clouds are generated at a significantly lower resolution. You'll see that they're just a little bit blocky, but they're smoothed out a bit, and so you can tell those are lower quality. That actually is quite heavy on the processing for the game, so that has a high rendering cost, and that makes it drop the frame rate, having those kinds of clouds there. They've lowered the resolution. To me, it tells me that the developers that are handling this port, the individuals, do have an understanding of optimization to some degree, that they're able to lower the resolution of the clouds there. On the PS5 version, the clouds are being rendered at just a higher resolution, and that's something that's an important consideration to make. Not every developer would go through that and understand that that's something that they can do to improve the performance of the game. It's a little stuttery here. My computer seems to be heating up, so that's not necessarily the game. Again, you'll want to click the links in the description for the higher resolution. My computer sounds like it's about to take off here. Again, I'm seeing more conscious decisions from the developers when it comes to lighting areas. This looks tonally, it's just more interesting than the PS5 version. I've seen a fair bit of gameplay and videos from the other versions of the PS5 version, and they're dull. The whole thing looks so boring and dull to me. The Switch 2 version, because they are not able to rely on brute forcing it through some advanced lighting system, the developers have made conscious decisions that just make this look interesting. You have color combinations between the scenes that just make things pop a bit more. More contrast in terms of the cold color temperatures and the warm color temperatures. Cold would be blue, green, warm would be red, yellow. They're just more punchy in this, and I believe it just comes down to making more conscious decisions. Having multiple light sources influencing a character or a scene, coming from different directions, casting interesting shadows, having complementary colors, those are what make visuals interesting. This looks pretty neat to me. It seems to be running just fine, but there is something funny that you see when the camera angle changes. Sometimes you'll see things pop in a second later. That is because objects will not render in, or assets will not render in, until they are within view of the camera. It's pretty funny. It's something that you can catch, and it does happen pretty quickly. You only see it for a couple frames, but it's very distracting, and it is something that is handled on the engine's side. That is a decision that the developers have made. Instead of handling that themselves, instead of the developers creating a solution on their own, they're letting the advanced features of the game engine handle all of the heavy lifting, the brute force work, and that is, to me, not good. You can see the hair's quite stuttery there with the physics. That's something that could use some improvement. So for me personally, in my games, if I see something like that where an asset is not loaded in until it's visual on screen, and then it causes visual stuttering, it's distracting, it ruins the presentation, then what I do as a developer is I just make sure that those assets are loaded in ahead of time. If you know, as a developer, you know when an asset is going to be required. So if you were competent and if you understand that, you would load those assets in ahead of time. You can do things like take those assets and stick them under the stage, stick them behind geometry so that you can just force them to load in, and that's just a very simple way to do it. There's other ways to do it as well that require more programming, more work, and that's something that maybe some developers may not want to do because it takes time, because it is not within their wheelhouse. so to speak. I'm not trying to say that people are bad developers or incompetent. I'm just trying to share some advice in that if you see that sort of stuttering where assets don't load in and then it stutters for a second and then you see them pop in, you can do things like stick assets within the geometry where they can't be seen, hide them under the stage. That's what I've done in my games, for example, in the past when enemies load in and it causes the game to stutter. What I do is I take a copy of the enemy that doesn't have the logic activated, just has the graphics, and then I'll stick them in the scene, under the terrain, under the stage. That'll force that asset to load in while the game is loading so that the game can run smoother and it's an overall better experience so that you don't have the stopping and stuttering. It sucks that you see physics where they are not activated until they are within view of the camera, and then the physics suddenly activate and you see clothes sort of flutter for a moment. Find a way to fix that, because that's very distracting to me. It always takes me out of the moment. But this is interesting to me. This looks fine. I think the more conscious decisions that the developers make, the better. I do like these light streaks. It makes it look like a J.J. Abrams film. You do not need fidelity. You do not need complexity to make something look good, to give it quality, to make it visually appealing. It is your decisions as an artist and as a developer that make something good or not. We might discuss Metal Gear Solid Delta, because that is a situation where the developers, it looks like they're relying entirely on brute forcing, making the game look good. The developers are very competent, so I don't understand what their decisions process was like, because the game does not run as well as it can. And it can run better if they had just made more conscious decisions as opposed to letting the game engine do all the work. So anyway, if you want to see this game, this video, again, click on the link in the description. I do like the conscious decisions that I see from the developers here. Again, I'm not a fan of Ubisoft, but if you are, that's absolutely fine. We are allowed to disagree with each other. I don't agree with Ubisoft's business practices. Their attitude towards gamers is quite disrespectful. So it's fine if you still support them. It's fine if you want to enjoy this game, and it's fine if you want to hate this game and make fun of it and bash it. Do what you want. I'm not your mother. I cannot tell you what to do. I'm just saying I'm not interested in this game, but I think the Switch 2 version looks fine. I like what I see here in terms of the visuals. The presentation could use some work because the developers have relied on the game engine to do the heavy lifting, but I'm seeing conscious decisions here from the developers that tell me that there's some competence here. There's a deeper understanding of what they're doing with their game engine and presenting something interesting. You see a bit of that pop in there again. That's something that I hope can be ironed out. It's very unappealing to me, and it's very easy to fix that. It's so easy to create simple creative solutions that you can implement them very quickly and solve that problem. But I think this is something that people will enjoy if they were to play it on the Switch 2, because it looks fine, it looks good. It's not going to run at 60 frames a second, you know, it's not a PlayStation 9, but it doesn't have to be. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed hearing from me about this, and if you are looking forward to this game, I hope you enjoy it. I hope you have a great time with it. Okay, I think this looks pretty cool. I hope you are well. I hope you're looking forward to doing some great gaming. And while the weather is good, if the weather is good where you are, get out there, enjoy the outdoors while you can. Have some adventures, go on some road trips, meet some people, make friends. Have a great time. Take care of yourselves and be well. Lastly, I just want to thank my Patreon supporters, and you guys make it possible for me to spend time creating these videos and doing my free homebrew games and picking up props and costumes to make the funny sketch videos. Alright, if you want to see some other videos, they will be on screen. Thank you. I'll see you next time.